Young Nudy to me is easily one of the best trappers, best trap rappers at the moment, quite by a considerable margin, but also considerably getting a bit underappreciated by a lot of the critics and reviewers out there. I can't really think of many reviewers that have even touched on him, or many publications that seem to be giving him much praise at all, when quite easily in his lane right now, I don't think many people are coming close. You've got the really strong mixtape series that's been really good for quite some time, and he's been really consistent with his mixtapes. You've also got Anyways, which came out in, was it 2020? I think it was 2020. 2019 or 2020? I think 2020. Was it 2020? Whatever year it came out, it was a really good album. Probably my favorite of his so far, to be honest, actually. It was definitely probably the most accessible one. I think he found a nice way to bring in some really good hooks, some memorable beats, but also kept his usual kind of grimy, dirty style, which has made him so good for so long. And yeah, EA Monster is just a continuation of that. 34 minutes, straight to the point, just young Nudy spitting over some really great production. The boingy beat on the first track, None to Do with it. None to Do, I think it is, None to Do. Sounds like he's gonna do a none to do. It's like he's got a to-do list, and it just says a none. But yeah, KitKat coming right after it, one of the best tracks on this album. So good. The classic Pierre Bourne production here, man. Pierre Bourne is a master at production. He's worked with Nudy for quite a few projects in the past, and you just feel his influence coming straight through. Nudy is rapping so well over this beat. It sounds so familiar for what you'd expect from Pierre, but it's so good nevertheless. He has his usual kind of gang banging shit that comes through on Lunch Meat. Definitely some really violent imagery being painted up on this track. I've said this before about Nudy, but I tend to try and ignore those violent bars and just enjoy the music for what it is, because he does say some pretty twisted things quite frequently. That could be why maybe he's not really getting much of the praise because of that. I don't know, maybe that's why other reviewers aren't really touching his music, they aren't really reviewing his stuff. It might just be that kind of thing that puts people off, which, to be honest, I'm not going to fault you for. Fresh as Fuck is a great track too, really intoxicating with the instrumental, and the way he's kind of like finding these nice little pockets to slip into and also bring out some really catchy, memorable lines that just really stand out in such a great way. Just makes Nudy so good for what he is and so good at what he does. Sick Slime has one of the catchiest hooks on the whole thing. It's so memorable and so good. The lines that he's saying though at the start, where he's talking about dick riders and cutting off of dicks, is just very young Nudy in the most bizarre way you could ever think of. The track Ready is more toned down. It's a bit more melancholic in its sound. Nudy's not quite as animated and as lively, which is usually what I come to his music for, to be honest. There are tracks like Deeper Than Rap that he's done in the past, but lyrically those tracks were so strong that it didn't matter that he was kind of restraining himself and going into a bit more of a moodier direction with his rapping, because there was so much to be said on a track like that. But I didn't really think this track was as good in comparison, and I honestly would have just preferred some of the boingy, bouncy beats that he comes through with rather than something like this. And then you got Project X right at the end, which sounds super slick. He just sounds so cool with the way he's rapping on this track. Yeah, it's a good album. It's a good album. I was sort of teetering on whether I would give this a higher score or not, but I think ultimately Nudy is just delivering what he's really good at, and while it's really enjoyable and fun, I think some of the tracks actually aren't quite as good as they were on the first listen I gave this album. Like, some of them started to fizzle on me just ever so slightly, but still want to praise this guy and want to highlight his trap music, because again, in the genre, I think he's one of the best at the moment, and certainly one of the most consistent too. Like, he hasn't really put out many weaker albums at all. So yeah, for me, this is a 7 out of 10. Definitely worth your time. Yeah, let me know your thoughts on young Nudy, if you've listened to him before, if you've listened to this album, if you have any opinions, tell me in the comments. Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.